From the SABC's Auckland Park studios, welcome to this midweek edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and on the show tonight,
this is the most important phase in our education. We miss it here, we are gone, but sorry back.
The 2023 school year begins in earnest. Basic Education Minister NG Motshekga joins us to give you her perspective of how day one went. This while we put to her some of the concerns, complaints, questions, and fears that our teams of journalists have gathered from their interactions with parents, teachers, pupils, and other stakeholders. The Watchdog starts now. Basic Education Minister NG Motshekga has pleaded with parents of learners who have not yet been allocated schools to give them at least 10 days. Motshekga was speaking in Cosmos City, north of Johannesburg, where she was monitoring the first day of schooling in inland provinces. 1,500 Gauteng learners are yet to be placed. Giving a breakdown of Gauteng's numbers, the minister said they are working to resolve the problem.
The start of the new academic year, and yet again hundreds of pupils missing out on the first few days of schooling. Of the more than 800,000 applications received for 2023, education officials say they've placed almost 90%. These applications include grade 1s and 8s, transfers from different schools, and pupils moving province.
When I spoke to the minister this morning, the MEC this morning, he's got 1,500. So as much as we see the big problem, we should also see the big problem, the big progress. Because they've been able to successfully place more than 800,000. There's 1,500, and I want to admit one is one too many. They have to deal with 1,000. So we shouldn't create an impression that the 800,000 that have been placed, there were problems. Yes, there were problems. The 1,000 that is outstanding, that is all over in the provinces, we commit that within the next 10 days we'll sort out the 1,000.
Motshekga monitored schools in and around Gauteng and went to one of the schools she had opened in Cosmos City in 2007 when she was MEC. While Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi and Education MEC Madume Chilwane were in Gawankua, north of Pretoria.
Without your ICTs, you won't be able to do it, because then you rely on your head count in places you don't know. So it's a very helpful system for a situation that we find ourselves in Gauteng. So it's not only parents that really find it frustrating that we can't place kids in the first hour. But we're saying within 10 days, we would have done the best we could.
For the parents of these grade 1 pupils, they were excited to walk their children to class for the first time, but niggling issues with the online administration system remain a serious challenge.
Just in the middle, it was a bit of a back and forth because I don't think the process was clearly explained, but I then got the principal involved along with somebody who was working at the district, and the one thing that I'll say stood out is how the principal was involved in it. She facilitated and assisted with communication, with speaking to the district, and that's one thing that gave me peace again to say, okay, the school is involved, the principal is involved, and luckily she's here, the transfer was successful.
Not all parents are using smartphones, and some parents are too old. Okay, fortunately I'm still young, I'm able to use smartphones. But for old parents, like if it happens that my mom has to apply for my child, she doesn't know anything, she doesn't use a smartphone, she has to go all the way to the internet cafe to do all the process for my child. So I think the old way is still the best.
And while the department remains adamant that their online placement system is working, parents whose children haven't been allocated a school yet remain frustrated by the glitches in the system. Nozintombi Mia, SABC News.
The Minister of Education, NG Motshekga, joins us on the line for a conversation. Minister, good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me, and good evening to your listeners.
Let's start with the issues that inset, or some of the issues raised in that inset by Nozintombi Mia. You yourself saying, even, yes, we must celebrate the achievements or the successes of this process, but as you said, even one a pupil who doesn't get to be placed is one too many. Have you been able to put a finger on why we keep on having this problem at the beginning of each and every year?
No, you're quite correct. Every year and everywhere. It's not only in Gauteng where they are using an ICT system to place, even in case in Mpumalanga where they are not using the same system, we're not able to place all the learners. So the problem, as unfortunately parents allude to, it's not only the ICT system. One, as I say, parents would have told you, uploading wrong information, shortage, inadequate spaces in terms of what the demands are, late applications, wrong information, but also on the part of the system, placing kids wrongly. For instance, a child in Midrand would have been placed in Soweto because there's Maibuye. In Midrand, there's Maibuye in Soweto, and then it's placed there. And those are all the things that we try to correct within the 10 days. But it's a number of factors. We have limited spaces in our system. We have lots of in-migration. We have inadequate space in terms of the demand. But also there are all these technicalities between ourselves and parents in terms of information, loading the correct information. But what I'm trying to correct for you is that in Gauteng, by January, we had 149 learners unplaced. And between the 4th of January and now, they've come down to 1,000. And it's not only in Gauteng that we've not been able to place learners where we're using this system. In Mpumalanga, we have not been able to place all of them. All the inland schools have also difficulties or challenges in terms of finding spaces for learners. And I really have to apologize to parents. I know it's very painful to be uncertain about the future of your child, where the child is going to be placed. And I did say to parents, basic education is compulsory, and as government, we have an obligation to find spaces for kids, and we'll have to meet our obligation of ensuring that their kids do find spaces in our system.
Now, if, I mean, there's a tendency, on the part of parents to perhaps give the wrong information. If, as you say, in other instances, it's problems of the system or the administrators placing kids wrongly. Now, having identified those particular problems, have you then proactively gone or to try and actually deal with those problems or mitigate the impact of?
No, as I said, from September, we start tracking down delivery of books, furniture, appointments of teachers as we prepare for the back to school. In December, when I got the report on Gauteng, they had 149,000 learners unplaced. So in between, they were using all the time to clean up the data, to communicate with parents. So we have systems in place to enable us to mop up where there are difficulties and challenges. So even now, when I spoke to the MEC in the morning, he was at 1.5, and he promised me that by the end of the day, they would have identified spaces and also tried to mitigate against any other errors that would have occurred in the system. So we have a process in place to make sure that indeed we can correct or we can clear off or clean off the system as we proceed. When we say 10 days, we're just not sucking it. It's also part of the process of mitigating against these challenges that we're confronting. So it's not just a number of 10 days, but it's because we've worked out what it will take us to be able to clear off all the other backlogs.
Now, if then, Minister, you're saying the 10 days that you've promised, it is time you'll need to be able to rectify the problems. Have you been able to say, well, last year we had so many or so much of these types of problems. This year, we've been able to reduce that by this much because we did A, B, C, and D. In other words, I'm trying to get to a point where you're able to then say, whatever or everything you're putting into the system now is informed by information. It is informed by work that has gone into this. In other words, there is movement, there is progress. We'll have fewer of these problems, if any, come next year. In other words, you are deliberate about each and everything that you are doing now to address these problems or stop them from occurring eventually. In other words, not trial and error.
No, very deliberate for you. If you recall last year, by this time in January in Gauteng, we had more than 20,000 learners unplaced. This say it's 1,000. So it's a big improvement from where we come from, even from the past, where we even have had more than 20,000 learners unplaced. So the provinces have worked very hard to clean the system, to improve the system, to even add more features in the system which help the system to improve. I mean, this system, for instance, the Gauteng system, when you log in and say it's in Midrand, it even has a geopolitical mapping which will tell you, a geo mapping which will tell you which 8 schools around the area. So the system has been improving year on year. As I say, I was very encouraged that when I spoke to the MEC to check where we are, he said 1,500. Last year in Gauteng, we had more than 20,000. So it does prove that the system is being improved on an ongoing basis. And some of the technicalities will always happen. So we're using a system which is ICT-based. You had one of the insights says, with my grandmother, my mother used to apply for my child, and I'm not sure why you're not applying for your child, and your mother who can use a smartphone apply. But there are all those difficulties where you find that it's circumstances beyond our control and beyond the parents' control. The parent does not stay with the child, is left with the grandmother who's not using a smartphone. It does mean that we have then to use traditional methods. Day one, we register paperwork. So we'll always encounter some of the difficulties because of human factors, but as the system has improved a lot.
But that said, are there things that you still haven't done, that which you are working on, and once you get right, they will hopefully put an end to these things? But we're talking specifically about things that are within your control.
If wishes were horses, will have children placed by December, so that parents can buy uniforms and other things. But some of the problems, Vuyo, are not even the system itself. It's because young parents are moving, they're looking for greener pastures. Some of the people who come in directly to me, people for an employment in Gauteng, or they decided in January to bring their kids in Gauteng. So there will be those challenges. So I don't want to say the system will be perfect, because there will be human factors between us and parents. But in terms of technology, I am sure that at the rate Gauteng is improving its system, we should, and that's what we want, that by end of the year, we should have placed all the learners who have applied. If there have been wrong placements, we would have worked with the parents to correct those placements. And I'm confident that, because I mean, 10 days for me, it's really greatest improvement. And I can confirm that we're doing everything with our ICT teams to perfect the system. And yeah, and I do hope that maybe come next year, by December, all people who have applied will have been placed, and we only deal with emergencies in January. Of people who really have only decided in January where they want to live and where they want their kids to be.
Now, from what our reporters on the ground have gathered at Malamulele in Limpopo, there's a different set of problems in a couple of schools where parents feel that their children's rights to free basic education is being undermined or even tampered with. Malamulele Secondary School is demanding a once-off payment of, I think it's about 500 rands from parents before they can give them, give the kids stationery. Yet it's a no-fee school, public school, must be underlined, where stationery and meals are supposed to be provided for by the government. And the Department of Education in the province, it would seem, is hopelessly throwing its hands up in the air, not able to assert its authority or give direction to the parents. Before you answer, Miss, I'd like you to listen to some of the parents and community leaders we spoke to, or we've been speaking to over the past couple of days on this one.
The parents who does not have money, it means their children are not supposed to go to school now. If the education, they say education is free, but here we are, our children does not have the books today, but the department says it's free education now. It means tomorrow there will be no school, because we are not going to allow the richest people to attend the school while our children will be staying at home.
They said they want 500 and some says 550. So then after you paid 550, you can able to get a registration. So we try to ask them, what's the reason for us to pay 500? Why? They said now we want to pay for security and the person those are looking for the school being cleaned. So up to so far now, we don't know how can we do, because up to so far everyone is going back home.
There was never a meeting to inform parents last year about this 550. We don't even know how they arrive at 550. In this one, we have 3 high schools. We have EPP Menga that has more enrollment than this one. And EPP Menga has had a meeting last year where they've asked the parents to contribute 150. Now, it's injustice to ask for these people who are using grant 550.
Minister?
No, we are, as I say, I'm hearing it for the first time here. We are only getting our returns in the afternoon, but just to respond on the basis of the insert, the money was for books, the money is for security. We need to know exactly why the school will charge 500, but just the general practice is children are not denied to go to school because their parents can't pay. But SGBs, and that's why it would have been nicer for me to speak to the SGBs. Parents, school parents, do take decisions to raise funds in whatever way they do, whether they charge, they get every family to contribute 500 rands. So you need to get to the bottom of how did they come to the 500. I am not sure if they say no one knows, the parents came. I mean, there's a school governing body. It should be the chairperson of the school governing body who explains how the school came to 500. I'm not sure if it's a decision of the principal alone, but it will be unfair to keep kids out, but it also will be unfair for parents who are aggrieved to block other children from coming to school. We have to give the 500 outside blocking kids. Say, if I can't pay 500 pounds, my kid can't come to school, no one's child will go into school. I just don't think it's very productive. But what we'll do, I'll check with the MEC to say what is happening in Malamulela. It is illegal to keep kids away from school because parents can't pay.
And that for me, Mister, is the nub
the right to raise funds.
Oh, that for me is what you said right towards the end of what you just said is what I was going to specifically ask you, where the law stands. In other words, whether it was 500 or 1,000 or 50 rands for that matter, what does the law say about, you know, children who say, or whose parents say they cannot afford? Can they be denied education? Can they be denied textbooks because the majority of parents at a school meeting organized by the school governing body decided that this is what we are going to do? Where does the law stand on that one?
Now, if it's a free school, free, no fee paying schools,
which this one is.
Yeah, it will be legal to keep a child out of school because they're not paying. But the law also allows parents, as a body, at a parents' meeting, because they're governors, to say we would want to have, as the other want to have security, want to have the other things that the government is not providing, and therefore, as parents, we are taking a decision that we will fundraise so much. But even when they fundraise, they have no right to keep kids out, but they also have the right to fundraise if they've so decided to do so. So they have to make sure that kids are not denied their rights, but also we also have to respect the fact that parents have the right to fundraise if they so decide as a proper body governing a school.
Now, whose job then is it to make sure that these rights are balanced? Who should then intervene? For instance, I mean, we know for a fact that there are parents who are simply not present in their children's lives, and that's no fault of those children. Who then becomes the final arbiter when situations like these arise? Because at the end of the day, it has to be about the education of that child, and that child should not be denied, you know, the right to learn simply because either their child didn't care or the majority of parents who could afford have blocked him or her from attending school.
No, the law is an arbiter. You don't even need the arbiter. It will be illegal, it will be wrong to keep kids out of school or deny them education because their parents can't pay. That's why there's free education. So you don't need an arbiter. So whoever will block them is doing something illegal and something wrong. On the other hand, it will also be illegal for any parent to block somebody's child from entering a school because they are aggrieved about something. So in both sides, you don't need arbiters. The law is there. It's quite clear. You can't deny them education if they can't pay, but you can't block other people's children from entering or accessing education because you have an issue or you are aggrieved. There are governing bodies. Let them process the matters through governing bodies and not block other people's children from accessing education because they have an issue to do with that. So we don't need an arbiter. The law is very clear on both sides.
Now, yesterday, here on the program, Minister, we had a parent, Brenda Matebe, who has lived through 7 years of hell from what she has told us. In 2016, the single parent and had 2 children relocated from the Eastern Cape to the Northern Cape, where she took up a senior post. She couldn't find an English medium school for her children, who are now aged 11 and 15. So I spoke to her. She told her story. The MEC of Education in the Northern Cape was also on the program together with her, and this is what he said. This is how he explained the problem and what the department in the province has been doing about it.
We also informed the MEC years ago that the department manipulates the outcome of the data that they collected. On that 55, as we counted amongst ourselves, we got more than 200 applications that were sent to the department, but we don't know where the other applications are. Last year, we had a survey again. I was also part of that. As parents, we collected on our own, with our own resources, without the help of the department, 407 completed copies. The department only captured 340, and now it is back to the question of manipulating of the statistics. Where are the rest of the hard copies that we collected? And in terms of the task team,
yes, continue. You can finish your point.
We have been part of the task team, me and the parents, but the department's officials will always have some reasons not to come to meetings and push meetings back. That is where it turned out that we had to be aggressive, and they opened a case against me at work. And we are no longer part of this task team because the department is always busy. They don't have time. When we always give our time for this, they don't want to work together with us.
Issues that we are considering is, the first one is the legislation. The norms and standards for language policy in public schools indicates very clearly that it is reasonably practicable to provide education in a particular language of learning and teaching if at least 40 learners in grades 1 to grade 6 or 35 learners in grade 7 to grade 12 are interested to be taught in that language. That is what the norms of standards is saying on the language policy in public schools. So with the information that we are gathering, we are trying to determine whether we are meeting the requirements of the legislative framework.
Did you just say 40?
I am saying for grade 1 to 6 is 40 per class, and for grade 7 to 12 is 35 per class.
Are you saying you don't have those numbers currently?
Currently, we don't have those numbers. We must look into the geographic outlay of the district. Namakwa is the biggest district that we are having in the country, not even in the province. It's a sparsely populated, vast area. These 600 learners that we have established that they are interested to be taught in English are spread all over the district. Others are in Springbok. From Springbok, we got areas that are 300 kilometers, others are 200 kilometers. So they are spread all over, and they are in different grades. Okay. Some of them are in lower grades and others are in higher grades.
Now, as you have, heard the minister, lots of accusations leveled at the department, as well as counter accusations. Perhaps parts we didn't play there was the MEC, of course, denying that departmental officials were manipulating the numbers and were often not present at these critical meetings where this issue was discussed. But I wanted to just speak to the plight of these children, because from what their parents or the parents involved were saying, some of them have had to repeat years because they were battling to cope, with this Afrikaans environment. And one wonders what that does to the poor child, how it affects their progress at school, how it affects their confidence as they move on, studying and later on, in life. I don't know what your position is on this, notwithstanding what the law says currently in terms of the numbers you have to have first before you can even begin to think about providing for these children.
We need, in the real world, we need to balance things out. We need to balance the rights of people against what is possible. If I decide here that I want to go to Venda and go and work there and expect the school to provide Setswana for my child alone, it's not feasible, it's not practical. And I think that's what the MEC is trying to say. It's not practical. So in order for us to be able to provide for the needs of children, there must be some standards to say at least there must be 45, because when there are 45, we're able to provide a teacher. When there's one child, we're not able to provide a teacher. And I think that's why the parent was raising questions about statistics, which I'm unable to argue about, to say there were 400, they manipulated, because that's where the problem is. Do we have enough children in that language who really have to be taught in that language? Because unfortunately, some of the decisions are difficult for parents. Some of the decisions we take should also involve our children. If I decide to take a job in Tzaneen, I should know that it comes with consequences of language, of all sorts of things, so that we really balance the rights against what is real. So if there's only 5 children who want to be taught in English in a school which is Afrikaans medium, the province will not be able to provide for that service. So they have to go to another school where they can learn in that language, because that's a practicality that the MEC is referring to. Notwithstanding that, if wishes were horses, will teach one child, provide them with whatever they want, but it's not realistic and it's not practical.
But yes, something.
For me, the answer lies in the statistics that the parent was raising. And I think that's why she's raising issues about statistics. She understands at which level are we able to provide for language differentiation, and if the numbers agree. Unless there's agreement between the MEC and the parent about those numbers, it's difficult for me to adjudicate, because I don't have facts. I don't know who's telling the truth. Between the officials and the parent, I'm not doubting anybody's version, but I'm unable to give an informed opinion on something I don't have full facts on.
But there's something.
But the policy is that there must be 45.
But there was something very interesting that the MEC also said, Minister, which made me think. He said that when the issue was taken up, right, which was, I think it was 2019, then more parents came forward who were not new to the area, but there were these courageous ones who were willing and able to spearhead this, pick up the gadgets and really fight for what they believe was their rights and for the rights of their children. The numbers then went up. The numbers shot up. Because as we stand now, it is nowhere near, it's in the hundreds, which then suggests that perhaps parents had accepted the status quo and perhaps felt that there was no need, or they couldn't really take up this issue with the authorities, even though their children may have been suffering. Which then brings me to the question of whether you have, as the department, the means or the wherewithal to actually keep track of these things to a point where you are able to facilitate, whether it's conversations at the beginning, to assess, whether, in fact, there are no issues that you may not be aware of, but which are affecting the education of these children.
Again, we have the policy guides. We don't even need to really, as I say, put systems to track if there are enough children who are taught in the language of their choices. The policy guides to say, again, parents are governing schools. Language policy, it's the responsibility of parents. But if parents are not, some parents are not happy about the decision that their governing bodies have taken around the language policy, which is a school governing power or responsibility, until we change the Bella Act. We're trying to change the Bella Act to remove some of these powers from parents. But for now, the law says language policy, admissions, and all sorts of things are the responsibility of parents. So until we change the Education Act, it means it's with parents. So if some parents are not happy with the decision that school governing bodies have taken around language policies, they have the right to make an appeal to the province, and they have the right, because it's a national law, to escalate the matter to us. So we don't have systems to track that down, because, as I say, it's not now legal, it's not our responsibility, but we have the power to intervene in the situation where parents are aggrieved and they want to escalate the matter. We're able to intervene and really find a way of mediating between the school, the province, and whoever is concerned. And we've intervened in the past. We've intervened in MLO. We've intervened a lot in Gauteng. So we are able to intervene. But parents have to escalate it past the school governing body. They can't jump the school governing body, which by law has the right to determine the school policy, the school language policy.
Now, in Mpumalanga, Minister, from what our teams were able to gather today, at one school, parents were protesting outside, demanding answers from the management of the school and the school governing body. They are demanding answers because at Malelane Primary School at Nkomazi in Mpumalanga, the school is being accused of not admitting learners on the basis of their race. Let's play this little insert, Minister, and then I'll ask for your response afterwards.
Frustrated parents. Another school is in hot water following allegations of racism. These parents are accusing the management of the school of racism. They allege they have been on the waiting list for years. Malelane Primary is the only public school in the area. Parents are calling for intervention by the Department of Education.
The problem is, I've been applying for the past 4 years. Now, every year they're telling me one and the same thing. There's no space, the school is full. And they always tell me that I'm on the waiting list. Hence, they don't even tell you what number you're on the waiting list.
I'm looking for a place for my kids for schooling. I'm staying around the town. So I did apply. The principal told me that I must wait and wait and wait up until today. And I don't know when they can call us because today the school is open already.
We are facing so much challenges when it comes to the applications of kids because the issue that every time we come to do follow-ups in terms of the applications for the kids, it's always us black people. We've never had white people who has the same challenges we are having. And it's not the first time we've been applying for the kids in the school. It's been years we've been applying, but we always get rejected. And it's so painful because the requirements they need, we always have them. We work here and we stay here. And there's no other school that we can take the kids to because some of the schools that are here are private schools that needs you to afford them.
But the school denies the allegations, saying 45% of the learners are black, while 45% are white and 11% are Indian learners. The school governing body says the school needs more classrooms as it does not have enough space to accommodate more learners.
It saddens me to hear that because, yes, we are a school and we are within the Act, the Schools Act, and we have a policy, admissions policy. And what happens is people apply, but we can only take a certain amount of kids. And then at the end, if the class is full, it's full. Say we take the first 5 kids of a class, it still doesn't help the other 40 kids that's on the waiting list. So the problem really is not a race problem. It's nothing to do with race. It's just too many kids and too little space in the school. We actually need more schools. So I think the department really need to investigate getting more schools there because we've got the kids. They're always on the waiting list. We do whatever we can. It's always nice to be able to accommodate the kids, but you can't have more than the capacity of the school.
Meanwhile, the Mpumalanga Department of Education is looking into the matter.
If we receive claims of racism, we definitely investigate to verify that. But in this case, we have not received any report from the parents through any other system that we have, but we will be following up on that matter. And we want to encourage parents that should they have such incidences, they should report to the department so that we can assist.
Parents have vowed to camp at the school until their children are admitted. Nhlamulo Mabasa, SABC News, Malelane, Mpumalanga.
Before you give us your thought, Minister, let me just read one tweet that I think is related to that story somewhat. Rendani Mamburu says, please let's look at racism in Simon Becker Lyre School, which does not admit kids staying in the area and kids who were born before June 2018. Kids who are admitted are from Pretoria North and other areas which are outside the required area. Racism theme, basically. Your thoughts, Minister, or just from what you've been able to pick up from both the inset and what this tweet says?
Again, we are not able to give an informed view because if at that school in Malelane, 60% of kids are African, colored, and are black, and 40% is white, I would still want to be enlightened about where racism occurs because my sense is that it's the problems that we have as government of inadequate spaces, especially in your urban areas where people move in and you find that there are no space. It's not only unique in Malayland. You come to Midrand here, there are new developments, many of them which are coming in, and schools that were initially built in Midrand, built for Midrand people, I don't have enough spaces for those kids, which is very unfortunate. You go to Pretoria North, so it's not a Malayland problem only. And it's unfortunate, I think, as the HOD says, if it has not been reported and investigated, because racism is a very serious allegation. If it's really, we can prove that it's racism, we'll have to do it, but you can't easily accept racist accusations without your facts and verification. So even there, before we can really agree that it's racism, we'll deal with it, we will have to establish if indeed the lack of admission is racism or it's lack of spaces. Same also with Pakistan, and as I say, it's a national problem. You go to Pretoria North, they're going to find that schools have inadequate places because parents also, and rightfully so, want to make choices as to where their children go to school. And I think it's their rights, but unfortunately, even those rights are limited because they are also determined by the availability of space. The same allegation happened today in Kempton Park, where parents from the area again accuse schools of not taking their kids on racial basis because them as Africans are the only ones who are not finding space. But racism is a very serious allegation, and you don't do it lightly. And I agree with the HOD of Mpumalanga. They'll have to investigate the matter and deal with it on the basis of facts and information that will be at their disposal.
Minister, I'm going to ask you to allow me to take a quick ad break. After the ad break, we speak to the Minister about service delivery protests that affected the first day of schooling in the Northwest. We also speak about what may affect KZN schools, which is the situation that was caused by the recent floods that disrupted schooling, but also that destroyed schooling infrastructure in that province. We also speak about Matric results, which are coming up in the not too distant future. All that coming up in a moment. Don't go away. Service delivery protests in Lehuruche near Zirast in the Northwest have disrupted the opening of schools in that area. Learners were left stranded after schools remained closed due to protests over the provision of water. This is despite interventions by the provincial department in November after protesters blocked the N4 highway linking South Africa and Botswana. Now, Minister, I mean, this problem again has been with us for quite a while. Several communities across the country, engaging in this service delivery protest and in certain instances, destroying infrastructure, school infrastructure, but also municipal infrastructure as well. Have there been, any initiatives to really try and deal with this problem? I know, by and large, it's outside of your purview or what you can do as the Department of Education, but together with other stakeholders, have you been able to initiate some things that could really deal with this problem a little more decisively?
Well, as a sector, we have what we call QLTC, Quality Learning and Teaching Campaigns, which are constituted by parents, teachers, and communities to ensure that we promote education in our communities. It works well in other areas. For instance, when I was in Deep Slot today, the parents were priding themselves to say, because they play an active role in the education of their children, not even one school was vandalized this year. So that's where we need community cooperation, support, and participation. Because as you correctly say, some of the things are out of our control. When I saw that Northwest thing, I even phoned to check did they have water yesterday? They said no. Did they have it the other day? No. So they suddenly, it becomes a pressing issue today because it's the day of education and really holding their own children to hostage. or the future of their children hostage. I think it's a very unfortunate thing. And for me, the first response before even working to any point, it's to appeal to parents to appreciate education, not as something for the future, as life. And if they block their children's education, they should know that they are blocking their children's lives. Water is out of our purview. There are people who have to deal with it, but to then use their kids as a shield, their own kids, as a shield, when they are the ones who are supposed to protect their children. If there's no water, go and find water, but kids must go to school. If they have to carry bottles, they have to bring bottles, so that we can deal with community issues outside schools and not use schools as shields or anything that can be used. So it's an unfortunate thing. And I was saying to myself, well, I think that we, as the sector, we'll have to wait for them to find water where they know they're supposed to find water. We'll see them when they come back, because there's very little we can do. But it's very unfortunate and very saddening if schools are going to be used, or we're going to be blackmailed for matters which are outside our control. It is their responsibility also to make sure that we are supported as a school, and not that we are used as a school to fight battles which are outside our control.
Now, speaking of vandalism, I mean, many are returning to schools that are not in the condition they would have left them last year. Now, all manner of reasons have been given for this kind of thing. Lack of security, which I would imagine Mahamulele says is one of the issues he's trying to address by charging parents 500 rands or so. But in other instances, of course, there were promises of infrastructure that would be built, or the situation improved, but that they are returning to those schools with those promises not having been fulfilled. How are we looking there?
No, again, as I say, as a sector, we receive the biggest budget in the education, which is limited, which means there are things that we possibly cannot do. That's why, without defending Malamulela, it's when governing bodies say, with the little resources that we have, can we fundraise to be able to meet government or the department halfway where it can meet our needs? When I went to Deep Slot, it's parents themselves and communities who are working hard to make sure that schools are protected. And it's not only Deep Slot. In most schools here, it's because schools, unfortunately, are inside communities. So communities have the opportunity to create safe spaces for their children's school by providing, looking after them, making sure that they are well looked after. I mean, the schools I went to, none of them have been burglared, and the principals were saying it's because parents and the communities are defending and protecting those schools. And that's what we wish for in other communities. Schools are big facilities. I don't know how many security guards you will need to guard a school if you are to rely on security guards to guard the school. We rely on communities to support us and make sure that our schools are safe there in their communities and they're protected from any form of vandalism. Because sometimes a school who have not kept their promise, they ban a school as if banning will even improve the school, which again, it's unfortunate. It takes us back. And I have to admit, we have a major problem with infrastructure. We had raised it with cabinet. The president has accepted that we need help as the sector to be able to improve our capacity. The first priority is overcrowding. Our schools are badly overcrowded, which risks even the work that we do, even schools that produce good work. The challenges of overcrowding are going to undermine the work that we're doing in schools. So cabinet has considered that we need special assistance. We're looking at different ways of dealing with our infrastructure backlog. Gauteng, for instance, is a brilliant idea of giving monies to schools and communities to build, to have self-built, to extend or to increase capacity. So we're looking at different ways of dealing with our infrastructure, but it is really an albatross. It's one of the biggest challenges that we have as a sector. And if you destroy the little that we have, it really puts us back badly and becomes very unfortunate.
Well, let's hope, everyone will be able to, all stakeholders, in other words, will be able to deliver on those sooner rather than later. We've run out of time, Minister, but I have two very important issues to raise with you. The first one is the KZN situation. Schools are only reopening next week, but there's a fear among parents and communities that some schools may not be able to reopen because some of those that were destroyed by the floods have still not been rebuilt, or alternatives still have not been found. What do you know about that situation?
Now, we monitor also the flooding which took place, the storm damages which took place in Eastern Cape, Northwest, some even in Gauteng and KZN, and have to admit that we've not been able to address all the challenges, again, because of financial constraints, but also logistical constraints in terms of availability of land close to where people live. In some of the communities that were displaced by the floods, people have not been returned to that place, so there are also logistical problems. But I can tell you, we monitor the situation as national. We interact on an ongoing basis with our provinces. As I said, when we went on holiday, we had the school readiness. It will be part of the reports which we can share with you at some stage. Even now in January, we had HEADCOM. I got the report from the DG, also tracking out where we have challenges. And KZN, there's still major problems. And not only KZN, we still have storm-damaged schools all over the country. In KZN, even before the floods in Limpopo, in everywhere else. And we are doing all we possibly can do to see how we can address those problems. But it is a problem, I must admit.
Quickly, 20 seconds, Minister. Many people asking or questioning the wisdom of reopening schools when Matric results still haven't come out, and why those results still haven't come out or are coming out this late.
No, where they are unrelated, universities or any other institution so the opening of schools is unrelated to the release of Matric results, because those kids are not going back to school, the majority thereof. But even those who want to repeat can come to school. So it's unrelated. What we've decided to do as a sector, which is what we have been doing in the past, which was a problem, to put ourselves under pressure to want and produce results in December. Then there are some omissions, there are some challenges. Even here in January, there were some issues that we had to resolve, your maths paper. So there were some technicalities that we felt that unless we have cleared them, let's not release the results as if we're chasing something. Because the opening of schools has nothing to do with Matric results. Okay. Let's clear off all that we're doing, and we'll be releasing Matric results next week on the 19th.
Minister, thank you very much for your time this evening.
No, thank you very much for having me. And thank you for the opportunity.
Minister of Basic Education, NG Motshekga, there. And that brings us to the end of tonight's show. Thank you for watching, and do join us again tomorrow evening, same time.